Ratan, I want to thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you, Simi. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Do you remember when we first met? Long back.
Yes.
You'd just come back from the U.S. After graduating in architecture and structural engineering,
That's
wasn't it?
correct, yes.
Is that what you had planned to do with your life, to become an architect?
Yes, and in fact I worked in the U.S. as an architect and as a structural engineer for a period of time after I graduated and had no intention of coming back.
Then what happened?
My grandmother talked me into returning, or rather I returned because she wanted me back. She was at that time getting quite old, and I'd been very close to her. My mother and father had divorced when we were my brother and I were quite young, and she brought us up. So I was quite close to her, and she wanted me back. And so I came back for her, or I would not have come.
Yes.
I happily came back.
What was it like then?
It seemed like everyone was concerned that I should not be treated differently. So I was told to stay in an apprentice hostel. And I worked on the shop floor I was attached to various production departments. I was in the blast furnaces, near the furnace, in the steel melting shops. It was terrible at that time, but if I look back on it, it's been a very worthwhile experience because I've spent years hand in hand with workers. I have mixed with them. I have eaten in their canteens.
So actually, the Tata name didn't bring any privileges, did it?
No, in fact, I'd say it was a disadvantage. Here was someone who had just come in from Los Angeles being told that you will not take your car to Jamshedpur, you will go by bicycle, and out of a sense of rebellion, I refused, and I'd walk to work every day.
Really?
So, those kinds of things, looking back on those years, was a good thing.
Did you at any time feel any regret? What have I done? I mean, those lovely days in LA, and suddenly I'm in the middle of this.
Yeah, I almost went back 3 times in my life.
What stopped you?
I guess as time went on, the ties to remain here were less. He was an Indian through and through. He was a very, very warm human being. I really got to know him and love him as time went on.
When were you first aware that he had chosen you as his successor?
I heard he'd had a heart problem. Yeah. And he'd always start meetings by saying, well, what's new?
Okay.
And I said, well, Jay, I've been seeing you every day.
Yeah.
There's nothing new since I saw you last. And he said, well, I have something that's new that I want to tell you. Sit down. And he said, what has happened to me made me think that I need to step down. And I've decided that you should take my place.
God.
He took it to the board.
That's on the 25th of March,
I don't remember the
1991.
day, but probably if you say that's the day, that's the day.
But people who were present at that meeting say they regretted not having a camera to record the events. It was a moving experience.
Well, I've heard many of my colleagues say that there was history that day because apart from the fact that he was stepping down from a position he'd held for, 40, 50 years, there was therefore a lot of emotion attached to his giving up this position in favor of someone. Well, I think we all came out very moved.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It was the end of an era,
That's
the beginning of a
That's
new
right.
one.
That's right.
So what did you learn from him that you carry with you always?
What I learned from him, perhaps, and what I carry with me, is a sense of justice, which was always prevalent. He was always fair and just. He always did what he considered to be the right thing, irrespective of how difficult it was. And he stood up for principles, and he stood by people. He stood by me when I was in trouble in Nelco. So his value system, his simplicity, his sense of justice were all things that I think have stayed with me. And I hope I can emulate them even half as well as he was able to do through his life.
Talking about this value system, what I know of you and what I remember best about you from those early years was something that happened before you even met before you started working with Mr. G.R.D. Tata, so it was there in you in any case, was the fact that if you said something, Ratan, you always did it. I mean, in those days, we were all very young, and even if it boiled down to small things like, if you said you'd phone, you would phone. If you said you'd write, you wrote. You always kept your word. And I feel that that is an integral attribute of your personality. It's very important to you, isn't it?
It is, but I was dealing with someone who was in those days I looked upon as very attractive, and so it was. I was also driven by that. I can't say that I've been that honorable in terms of keeping my word on all sorts of things, but by and large,
You generally do.
I generally do. I tend to not say things loosely. I try to live up to whatever I've said, the commitments I've made.
After all these years, I know that if Ratan says it, you can count on it.
Well, thank you. That's a nice thing to hear. There's something that is important to me, and that is to go to bed at night or to wake up in the morning feeling that we have not sacrificed our principles and that we have not subordinated our values to some short-term materialistic aims. And in some sort of perverse way, you as a group are respected because they feel that, well, you will not do that. When there's something that deals with the nation or there's a calamity, people turn to Tatas.
Oh, yes.
And at other times, unfortunately, we feel we're discriminated against.
Like when?
When there are issues which relate to questionable ethics. Projects that we feel we should get, which we don't. But all of that is forgotten when there is something that no one else is willing to do.
Running such a huge conglomerate must be stressful at times, Ratan.
It is, but it's something that you don't mind. We feel so proud.
How do you unwind?
Most of the unwinding in the last 10, 12 years has been taking my dog for a run or just getting out and having a change of pace.
What sort of music do you like?
Oh, I've always been fond of all types of music. Love jazz. I love classical music.
What about television? Do you watch television?
Yeah, quite a bit of late.
Oh, that's good. And
So there's more variety to watch now.
do you see any Hindi movies?
You can't help but see them on television today.
I'd love to see the sight of Ratan Tata sitting watching a Hindi movie.
My Hindi's improved ever since I...
Can you remember any of the films that you enjoyed?
No. They're all so violent.
Yeah.
I am very irritating to be around when I watch television. I'm very impatient, and I watch 4 or 5 channels at the same time. Do you remember when we first met many years ago, walking on
the
Juhu
beach,
Beach
yes.
and so on was something I enjoyed. I still
remember.
enjoy it.
Yes.
And there's something in that solitude. A lot of thinking gets done, and a lot of unwinding gets done in that process too.
But in those days you were not a loner. But people say you are now.
Yeah, because I think over time one becomes alone, and the job makes you a little lonely. I'm very poor at keeping up friendships.
Yeah, you can say that
know.
again. Without a wife, without children, a family, what motivates you, Ratan?
I don't know what motivates me, but let me just stay with that for a minute. There are many times I feel lonely at not having a wife or a family, and sometimes I long for it. Sometimes I enjoy the freedom of not having to worry about the feelings of someone else or the concerns of someone else. And at other times it gets very lonely.
I mean, was it timing that...
Yeah, there's a whole series of things. Timing, my absorption in work at that time. There were very many things. I came very close to getting married a few times, and they didn't work out.
But there are, as they say, confinements and consolations.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So you must miss the consolations
Yes,
today.
yeah.
It's not too late.
Oh, it's never too late.
Who are your heroes?
John Kennedy.
Oh, yes.
Of course, I was very much in the U.S. at that time. That person stands out still as very much my hero at that time, and continues to get me emotionally nostalgic about the days
That's true.
that I was there. I'm proud to be an Indian. I love my country. I feel proud of what we do. I feel sad for what we don't do.
The highest standards of integrity that I've ever seen in anyone, in the manner in which you've conducted yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Not at all.